I'm gonna throw in my 2 cents that Sukuna's death wasn't trash, because I genuinely think it's misunderstood. So I'm gonna break things down as simply as I can in its entirety so the reading comprehension curse is removed completely. Let's start from the beginning. Yuji and Sukuna became enlightened beings, representing the idea of an immovable object facing an unstoppable force. Chapter 248 confirms Yuji has an unbreakable human spirit that represents selfless ideals, where later he attests to giving meaning to all life forms. His soul is the most powerful Sukuna has ever come across, but he hates him because this rationality is foolish. In contrast, Sukuna is a curse, believing love and ideals are worthless. Individual selfishness to appease desires is natural for a calamity, as the weak are insects that hold no inherent value and should die rather than cling to their worthless lives, since all it would be is pain and suffering. But to dive deeper, let's explore how the story built up to it. The fight between Yuji and Sukuna amalgamates all the major themes of Jujutsu Kaisen, such as whether sorcerers die with regrets, what is the meaning of a natural death, what is right and wrong, and ultimately, who will teach Sukuna about love. This is because the title of strongest comes with loneliness and isolation. Many who once held this title felt this way, such as Kashimo and Gojo. In chapter 220, Gojo claims nobody will ever need to be alone again and plans to nurture strong and clever allies. After all, corruption pushed his best friend Suguru Geto away to become misguided. This sentiment was realized by Yuta in chapter 261, that Gojo became a monster. Everyone doesn't see Gojo as a person and how important he is, bearing the burden of his power for their sake. We then witness Gojo annihilate all the higher-ups that he didn't want his students to see. Not sure if he's doing the right thing, but becoming a monster would mean his loved ones wouldn't have to worry about chaos like what happened after the Shibuya incident. Even though Yuta understood how Gojo felt, his sensei claims there's nothing that can be done ever since the moment Geto gave him an existential crisis, asking him that infamous question and departing him. The reason Gojo feels this way is linked to chapter 236, where he felt sorry for Sukuna because of isolation, as the strongest always have a gulf between them and other people. Even if society adores them, you can admire a flower and help it bloom, but you can't ask it to understand you. And remember, we then see the manga display a panel of Sukuna stating, the one who would teach you about love is, and of course, that is Yuji. Linking back to chapter 268, guess what he says? Sukuna, let's try one more time. Living not by cursing someone, but existing alongside them. Even if no one will accept you, I'll live with you. Now, you're probably thinking, what does this even mean and why does it make total sense? Well, Sukuna's idea of power compared to Gojo is completely different. Kashimo even asks Sukuna if connecting with others and loving those beneath him whilst knowing nothing of weakness, is it even possible? Is strength solitude or an endless search for greater power? But Sukuna told them they were all greedy and wrong, thinking that Yorozu, Kashimo and Gojo would have made much better company for each other. Both Gojo and Sukuna are natural disasters that are feared by everyone, yet Gojo identifies as a human through his choices. He felt like things were just getting worse and stronger curses were occurring more often. As a result, Gojo puts all his efforts into making his allies loyal to their good morals. Yuta and Yuji were both sentenced to execution, but he found loopholes to make sure they survived his plan. Now in contrast, Sukuna is a curse. In chapter 1, he states the hierarchy of society should be deemed by ability. In the past, we see politicians, sorcerers, and emperors abiding by his law. Now, this is where everything starts interconnecting with Yuji killing Sukuna. Uro confirms the cycle of sorcerers dying with regrets and people cursing each other has been ongoing for 1,000 years. But Yuta insinuates, similar to Yuji, that if you love someone or live for the sake of others, this can be counteracted. There is no reason to put all this effort just for yourself. Yuta says this is simply desperate selfishness. However, he is blessed with friends and lives for the sake of others. This motif is continued within Yuji and Sukuna's fight, as everything is but a choice on the role you choose. In the domain expansion, Yuji tries to get Sukuna to experience an average human life like his own, as he views the brat as having no value just like everyone else. The strongest of every generation has tried showing Sukuna love in their own way, but of course they failed miserably. This time, Yuji was doing it in his own way by making Sukuna understand compassion. Before, he believed it was important to fulfill the role of a cog. If he died with that mentality, he would have accepted it as a good death. But what does that mean? Well, early on, Yuji pondered the difference between the death he's facing and his grandpa, claiming he died peacefully and that curses do not give humans a natural death. After killing his first human, he asks Nanami what is a proper death, as it's a fate that no one can escape, but he always thinks to give his opponents a genuine one. But after his journey, everything changed. Yuji's I am you statement to Mahito is different from his you are me one with Sukuna. Mahito could perceive the soul in every living thing and was born from human resentment. He believed the reason humans think they're superior is only because of their nature to create reason compared to other life forms that can't, which makes their idea of justice flawed. This is because he's also a living creature that sees humans as prey, which makes it natural for Mahito to kill them. As a result, Mahito claims Yuji is just like him. It's natural for Yuji to kill curses and save humans, just as it is for Mahito to do the opposite. The line of good and evil is created by humans to impose on everyone else. So just as Sukuna said in chapter 238, it's not his problem if his stature cannot be measured or understood by the world. So before his enlightenment, Yuji initially believed Mahito was correct, that yeah, nothing matters. He doesn't even need to find a meaning or reason to kill. This meant he thought life was meaningless. But Yuji's journey to fulfill his purpose to kill Sukuna comes from his journey of suffering. Todo taught him that being a Jujutsu sorcerer means to endure punishment. Throughout the story, Yuji holds the curse of killing his own brothers. He couldn't do a thing to save Junpei, Nanami, and Nobara, as he initially thought she was dead. He watched Sukuna massacre thousands of people in Shibuya with his own body just to make him suffer. And so he started to blame himself for that incident. As a result, when he stood trial in court, Yuji admitted to all his crimes despite being innocent. Higuruma tells us that all people are weak and ugly. So no matter how high-minded a soul like Yuji aspires to be, he cannot save everyone. However, the manga clearly builds up Yuji's mercy and the you are me moment with Sukuna's death here, because in chapter 166, we are told that to empathize with human emotions means to understand their weakness. But Sukuna has never known weakness due to being the strongest in history. So having empathy to these emotions he claims to understand is actually impossible. Now, in contrast, Yuji felt weak multiple times in the story, such as against the finger bearer, Mahito, and even admitting it to Higuruma. He feels the worst that he had to kill someone from his own will and hands, as his empathy is actually linked to chapter 24. Remember that Junpei asked him something very important. Have you ever killed anyone? Eventually you run into bad sorcerers. What would you do? Yuji even back then said he would rather not kill anyone if it was possible, even if that person was bad like Sukuna. However, due to the lifestyle of Jujutsu, the choice to kill will find its way to him. And Yuji then says, if I question the value of life, then maybe the lives of those important to me will also become vague. And that scares me. So as you can see, Akutami had planned all of this from the start, as he showed Yuji as the direct contrast that was prepared to save Sukuna if he could. This chance is created with Yuji's domain expansion, as he explains that every human being can have a role of their choosing, and it can be anything from walking the dog to making a family. This would form a connection that would leave fragments of memories floating after death that hold meaning, as those fragments still become a story. It's perfectly portrayed with the false memories Yuji has with Choso and Todo. Even though their loving memories weren't real with Yuji, it still represented something that was. In turn, it created a new chapter in their book. Yuji is trying to highlight that everyone's story has an intrinsic worth, even if some people have huge shoes to fulfill whilst others have none. That doesn't mean that they shouldn't cling to life for being weak, as Sukuna claimed in chapter 214. However, there is a huge problem. The cycle of curses and sorcerers are in a never-ending war. The world Megami and Yuji wish to create would never be possible. Even the moment Yuji consumed Sukuna's finger, he had a choice to die now or die later, which is directly paralleled with him giving Sukuna this exact option in chapter 265. Yuji laments that he finally understood the pain and suffering others go through, whereas before he couldn't due to being naturally strong. His grandpa with lung cancer denied treatments with strong side effects to survive, as he believed in his own choice. But his suffering as a sorcerer, flooding him with awful thoughts, has taught him to empathize with anyone facing a helpless situation. However, Sukuna, he says, nah, I'm doubling down as a curse, surprised over his fury due to being looked down upon. For 1,000 years, Sukuna has been the pinnacle of Jujutsu. Even Gojo had to give him respect. He saw Sukuna as the strongest, and being confident in beating him was primarily to engage in a dance to feel human again. To fight Sukuna is to risk death, and pushing him to fight seriously is to gain his respect. However, Yuji straight up offers him mercy as though he is the very insect he looks down upon. Therefore, there couldn't be any greater insult to someone like Sukuna. So to make Yuji pay for his contemptuous pity, he will take it out on others. But Yuji informs Sukuna they were both born into the world shouldering curses. What type of monster you become is decided by luck. For example, Gojo was born blessed with the 6 eyes and limitless, right? But even so, he had to become a monster to be the catalyst that breaks the cycle. And similarly, Yuta, who was also blessed, bore his burden alongside him by taking over his body. In turn, Yuji also had to become a monster to save those he cherishes, where his journey forced him to kill his brothers and others when he never wished to. In parallel, Sukuna killing his twin out of hunger due to his mother's poverty is linked. On top of that, twins have always been a bad omen, yet Sukuna was the fallen one, as Angel and the Heian era dubbed him at birth. Therefore, Yuji tells Sukuna, "You are me." They both became enlightened monsters, but their paths deviated for different reasons. Sukuna was born an unwanted scorned child at birth, where the author confirmed Sukuna terrified people out of their minds to the point that they didn't even recognize him as human. It was so bad that he was known as the king of curses as a human before becoming a curse object. This is just like Yuji, who was born cursed due to Kenjaku's interference, but the difference was that his grandpa was around to nurture him, as this is what Yuji displayed in his childhood during chapter 265. We go through all the 4 seasons and the heartfelt memories he had created with his grandpa. Yuji basically attempted to make Sukuna realize the beauty of life by convincing him that he doesn't have to live like a curse, as he has a choice to live like a human alongside him, giving him a chance he didn't have since his birth. However, the crawfish scene did a brilliant job at displaying their difference. Sukuna states he won because his catch is bigger, but Yuji rebukes him stating his catch is more rare, which means that value is in the eyes of the beholder. A rare fish holds more value than one that's bigger and more common. We literally see even animals like horses bonding and showing affection through instinct, but even still, Sukuna can't feel anything that a normal person would. This is why Yuji has empathy for him, because through his bad luck at birth, where although Sukuna claims to understand these emotions, overall he doesn't feel a thing. He had no one to help and was hated by society from the start, which made him become a monster in the era he was born. This isolation would have empowered his mentality in his view for sorcery, that selfishness and living like a curse is the only way to gain true Jujutsu. After all, survival of the fittest reigned true in the Heian era. As a result, during the finale of Jujutsu Kaisen, Yuji encompasses the unbreakable will of the human spirit, while Sukuna is a curse, both representing the opposite sides of the same coin. After all, being one or the other is a choice you make. For example, someone like Naoya Zenin chose to become a cursed spirit, as his hatred towards Maki and the need for revenge triumphed over his emotions to move on. Even Yuji's brother proves he's correct about Sukuna. Choso loved his brother to the fullest, but also had promised Yuki that he would not let Yuji feel lonely and would live as a human rather than a curse. In their last conversation, Choso had expressed regret for choosing to live as a cursed spirit. The brothers didn't hate humans or sorcerers, but chose an easy option by joining Mahito's cause, thereby choosing the existence of violence, just like Sukuna. Hence, when Kechizu and Iso died, Choso had to bear the burden of their deaths because he had led them into this life. This empathy made him willing to die at any moment if it helped Yuji's cause. As such, Yuji tells Sukuna that they should try one more time upon his death, living not to curse someone, but together as humans who exist alongside each other. Even if no one will accept you, I'll live with you. Now, what does this mean? Well, in this story, we see the king feel ecstasy in chapter 253 against Maki, stating the outcome of the fight will prove what is worth developing more, sorcery or the body. He put all his chips into this lifestyle, where those that identify as the strongest who challenge him, he responds to them in kind by slaughtering them without cursing them, which meant Sukuna views violence as a form of acknowledgement, claiming love is worthless. Sukuna always said he is waiting for someone to kill him. He does what he wants in life until that time comes, even informing Yorizu that losing a jujutsu fight is equivalent to death itself, and he would accept its consequences. So by prioritizing strength above all else, Sukuna gave up his humanity entirely, leaving no trace of it behind. No yearning for connection, no longing for love, and no trace of vulnerability, as he doesn't consider carrying these burdens. This sets up a fascinating contrast of Sukuna with Yuji, because unlike Gojo or anyone else, he achieved something they could not. The king admits that the phenomena of connecting with a sorcerer in the heat of battle was presumed to be a side effect of curse energy, yet Yuji managed to connect with him through his domain. This was partly due to his increased understanding of the soul of those in it, to create a moment where they could explore the memories of a person that shaped the soul, which Sukuna and Mahito, mind you, admitted is the heart. And since their soul had to coexist in one body within the innate domain, he forces Sukuna to confront his ideals. Remember, Sukuna admits that Yuji isn't just another person, even acknowledging that he can't dismiss his ideals as inconsequential, and they are really genuine. This frustrates Sukuna that he could have been living his life wrong the entire time as a curse. Even in chapter 248, he ponders why he felt disappointed killing Higuruma, as Yuji was telling him all life has value. So Sukuna felt something creeping in, that Higuruma's talent that he compared to Gojo and himself was being wasted. So while Sukuna can accept the strength of figures like Gojo, Kashima or Jogo because he sees their prowess in Jujutsu as something he himself possesses, the idea of holding onto an ideal, it's beyond comprehension. Look at it like this. Sukuna claims he never sought fulfillment from others, but that doesn't mean his existence is fulfilling. On the contrary, his habit of devouring humans and his hedonistic philosophy reveals an emptiness and a constant craving for new experiences, leaving him never satisfied with his existence. Even with Yuji's mercy, Sukuna doesn't become a good guy, nor does he beg for his life, staying true to his nature. In depth, he congratulates Yuji on his victory and calls him by his name for the first time ever, acknowledging the MC and his strength. However, Sukuna also claims that Yuji is foolish and that he should not underestimate him because he's still a curse. They fight for their beliefs until the end, but Sukuna's fear of death highlights how all creatures are equal in the face of it. Gege Akutami even refers to this in chapter 222 when Sukuna looks at his own skull and he calls it ironic. Gege is referencing Hamlet in the panel. It represents memento mori, and this Latin phrase means remember that you have to die. Sukuna's skull in this scene of him consuming it depicts the theme of the inevitability of death. But now Yuji is enlightened, no longer believing he has to kill curses but can even save them as well, telling Sukuna they can give it another try where he can live with Sukuna, ultimately being the one that taught him about love, making his death perfect. Now to enjoy more peak fiction, watch this video on your screen right now.